Welcome to BioPractice webinar on FDA Medical Device Regulation Design Controls Overview. The presenter for today's webinar is Ms. Sheila Ramaman, RSC Founder, SJR Associates. During the presentation, if you have any questions, kindly post your questions in the chat box of your GoToMeeting tool, and the speaker would address those questions during the Q&A session. And now I would like to hand over to the speaker, Sheila Ramaman. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you, attendees, for taking the time out of your busy Fridays. Fridays are usually pretty busy. To listen to this webinar, and thank you also for rescheduling from last Friday. If it sounds like I'm talking around something, it's because I am talking around a throat lozenge. I'm recovering from a cold. Hopefully I should be able to get through the webinar with the aid of my throat lozenge. So let's get started. There we go. So our topics today are outlined here on this slide. What is design control? Why is it a requirement, a regulatory requirement? What are those requirements? Then we'll go through a typical design control process, which I think will address one of the pre-webinar questions. And then some tips for success, things that I have discovered in my time working with design controls that can help make your design control process better. So the first few topics. Design control, if you go by the textbook definition, is a process by which a product is designed, developed, tested, manufactured, distributed, used, serviced, and eventually obsoleted during its life cycle. So we've covered the entire product life cycle. It is really a framework for documenting all of those activities for a product. It has also been referred to as good quality assurance practices for design and development. It's also good business practice. It's been shown that if you discover and correct design errors early, it costs much less to correct those errors than if they come along later in the process. For instance, if you wait to do 100% inspection and test of your initial engineering prototype devices and find design problems, it's going to take more time and money to correct them then than if you have reviewed the design earlier on in the process. There's also a much higher likelihood that the right product is designed, developed, and manufactured for sale because you put the time into planning and designing before you actually start developing and building. It's an FDA requirement because FDA analyzed 6 years of voluntary recall data during the 1980s. So this is old data, but it was what FDA had at the time. Remember, the medical device amendments were only published in 1976. Before that, there were no GMP complaint or reporting requirements for medical devices. So after about 10 years under the medical device amendments, FDA took a look at the last 6 years of voluntary recall data and found that 44% of recalls were the result of design defects by the manufacturer's own analysis. FDA at that point decided that the GMPs were not adequate alone to ensure the safety of medical devices. So in 1990, the Safe Medical Devices Act was passed, and that added what was called at that point pre-production quality assurance to the GMP requirements for medical devices. Then in 1996, FDA released the quality system regulations, which added the specific design control requirement. And at that point in time, it was harmonized with the current ISO standards 9001, 1994, and 13485, 1996. The requirements for design control under U.S. FDA regulations are found at 21 CFR 820.30. CFR stands for the Code of Federal Regulations. 21 is Title 21 of that Code of Federal Regulations. That's where all of FDA's regulations are found. And the 800 to 1,000 parts have to do with medical devices. So the quality system requirements are found at Part 820, and the design controls are found at Dot 30 of the 820 quality system regulations. Every single clause under the design control section of the regulations says that manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures to control the design of the device or to control the particular requirement to ensure that specified design requirements are met. So I'm going to omit the shall establish and maintain procedures for at each one of the requirements because it takes up too much space on the slide, and I just want you to understand that that's a basic